we never take into account the story of Abraham and Hagar. Because after all, Hagar was a bondwoman. She was a slave. And she had her son that was not the son of the promise. So we hardly ever pay attention to that. But nevertheless, in this particular story here, we see God, even though people reject it or whatever, and they don't feel good about it, but God is God. And He demonstrates Himself in a mighty way in this particular instance that we're able to also identify and make it relevant to our day and time. First of all, we know that mothers go through a lot. We know that mothers, sometimes unexpected things comes up in the family, and it's very hard to deal with, but yet, some way, somehow, God blesses them and strengthens them and gives it the way out. I know that mothers is a very special person in our lives and in this world. This particular case, Abraham, who had made a mistake, by the way, he got ahead of the will of God, and instead of waiting for the will of God and wait for the child of the promise, he listened to his wife and had a child with a slave woman named Hagar. That child grew up and started giving Sarah a hard time, and the little baby, or Isaac, when he was born. And so Sarah made a decision to tell Abraham to get rid of the bondwoman and the child at the same time. It was very hard for Abraham to do that because he loved Ishmael. That was his name. He loved Ishmael, but nevertheless, God told him, Abraham, you're going to do what your wife says, because I'm going to bless this child also. And sure enough, Abraham one day got up early in the morning, took some bread, some water, and gave it to Hagar and the child, and he sent her away. He sent her away. Can you imagine the heartbreak that was on that woman? Unexpectedly, she had a child of Abraham, and they were doing so good, but all of a sudden, she's being cast out. Isn't that the case with a lot of mothers today? Unexpectedly, they find themselves in the wilderness. They find themselves suffering. They find themselves, her and her children, with nobody to direct them, no purpose for life, and they live like that. But yet, that's the case with a lot of mothers today. If that's the case with some of you today, let me assure you, we don't want to leave this in a negative note. We want to tell you that God is in control. There's something ahead of life for you. Because see, we may go through difficult circumstances here in this world, unbearable circumstances sometimes, but God is in control. God is still alive. The blessings of God are still flowing from heaven. The love of God is still flowing from heaven. The grace of God is still available. And God knows exactly what He's going to do with every one of us. Hagar was hurting. Hurting because she was rejected. She was rejected and was hurting on top of everything. And not only that, but she had pain. She felt abandoned. And there's a lot of women that feel like that today. Not only abandoned and hurting and rejected, but also she was hungry and thirsty. Not only all of those things accumulated in her, but her resources had run out. Do we see a lot of women suffering today because they had no direction? They've been abandoned, they've been rejected, and all of a sudden they have no resources to take care of their children. They can't give the children all that they need. No direction and no purpose. Everything is brought unto us, not because God is mean, but because of different circumstances that evolve out of decisions that are not right. These decisions that bring all these circumstances to all humanity. But yet we have, that is very common in our society today. I remember one time this lady came to my office and she was so desperate, crying, and she needed help. She had already been in different places, couldn't get the help. She came to my door in my office and knocked on the door, and she came in and she related to me. The first thing that she said, I wasn't expecting this. When I got married, I was not expecting this to happen. We were so happy. We were doing so good. But then all of a sudden, my husband went out of the way and started going out with another woman. And I can't take it. And I can't bear it. I don't know what to do. And I asked the lady, well, what is it that you want to happen? What's in your heart? And because she had received the advice of getting a divorce and just going on with her life. And I asked her, well, what do you want? And she said, I want my husband back. I want my family back. I said, okay, if you want your family back, then you're going to have to do what I tell you. Because I'm going to tell you something that is in the Bible. And she said, I'll do anything. I said, I want you to come to church for 3 months. And I want you to come every time there's a service. I want you to come and join us and just sing with us and worship with us. And we're going to wait on God. She did that. And to make the long story short, she did everything. And one day she calls me and she says, Pastor, don't worry about it. If he doesn't come back, I already made peace with God. I already found the Lord, and we're so happy, me and my children. I said, wait a minute. No. We've been praying for restoration. We've been praying for God to bless. You're going to have to wait for the blessings, but God is preparing you to receive the blessing. That's the time people want the blessing right away, and they mess it up again because they're not ready. You got to be ready with the right heart to receive the blessing that God has for you, because if you don't, you'll mess it up again. And sure enough, to make the long story short, that family got back together again, and they're now serving God. Amen? She didn't know. She was not expecting that. See, all these circumstances come because of bad decisions that are made in the family. But nevertheless, Abraham had made a bad decision. Then he had to come and make that decision of casting out the son that he loved and the woman, the mother of the child. And he says in verse 15, and the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under a shrub, because she said, I don't want to watch my son die. So she put him under a little tree, a shrub, and then she went out, I'm going to say about 100 yards, 150 yards away, and she was watching him. But she didn't want to watch him die and finish off. Lots of times, the mothers sometimes have to go through that situation because of the decisions that are made in the family. Sometimes they can't bear what's going on in our children. The family is being attacked every single day. And she was there with no direction, no hope, hurting, rejected. And to top everything off, her child was involved in something called death. She knew that death was imminent. She knew that it wasn't too much longer before her child was going to expire and die because of the lack of water and food. The hunger and the thirst. You know, mothers are watching children today go into little trees and hide there under the title of social rejection. They go into that little tree under habits that are killing them, and they're destroying their lives. And the mothers are watching the children little by little, not being spiritual fed, not being with God, but going into the world and dying little at a time. And they're watching all of that, and they're seeing all of that. On top of the hurt and the rejection and the lackness of resources, they see their children being taken off by different things that are killing them every single day. The child was hungry. The child was thirsty. They were going to die. You know, there's another hunger, another thirst that sometimes we don't think about, that is even worse from the physical hunger and the physical thirst, and that's a thirst for God. That's a hunger for righteousness. That's a hunger for being in the presence of God, for the hunger of knowing God personally. People don't understand that. They don't even know they like that a lot of times. A lot of times they don't even think of things like that because they can't imagine that would heal you. But when you make peace with God, your hunger is going to cease. Your thirst is going to cease. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. If any man eats me, eats my bread, will never hunger again. If anyone believes in me, will never thirst again. John chapter 6, verse 35. And Jesus made that statement because he knows that that's what society needs. But again, I don't want to leave anybody in a negative note. It was a desperate situation. And she went and set her down over against him in a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. Verse 17. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, what aileth thee? In other words, what's the matter with thee? What's the matter with you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Out of all the despair and hurt and rejection and seeing your own child going down the drain, so to speak, there's always a voice from heaven that will come to the mothers. There's always a voice from heaven that will come at a time of desperation. And that voice will produce, that word will produce great expectation. This is what mothers need today. They need encouragement. They need encouragement and great expectations for our children. How many mothers today they know that their children are suffering because they're into the world, in drugs, and there's a lot of things that are going on in the world today that I don't even want to mention here in the pulpit. But we're watching our kids. We're watching our kids going down the drain little at a time. But when God speaks to you, He'll say, what's the matter? Don't you know that I'm here? Don't you know that I'm here to succor you? I'm here to help you. I'm here to give you direction and purpose. To bring a great expectation to the mothers is a great thing. And that's what we plan to do this morning. Great expectation. No matter what you might be going through, no matter what circumstances you had to bear, no matter what your children are suffering, under that tree, that child is going to call on God. And God is going to hear the prayer. God is going to hear the prayer because He's attentive to everybody that calls upon the name of the Lord. Anybody that prays to God, God is interested in hearing him. And you know what? At a very appropriate time, God will come to help every one of us. Great expectations. Great encouragement. She got encouraged because of what the angel said. Fear not, for God has heard the voice of thy lad where he is. And then the encouragement comes in a way that, arise, lift up the lad, hold him in thy hand, lift up thy lad. You know, sometimes mothers may have a tendency of giving up on their children because they see that they're too far gone. I've heard mothers say, I don't know what to do with my child. He's too involved in drugs. He's too involved in things that are very unpleasant, and I can't reach him. I can't reach him. Mothers, let me encourage you this morning. God has said from heaven, says, lift up the lad. In other words, lift him up in prayer. Keep on praying. Don't ever give up, because they are your children. God has given that child to you. Encouragement for the mothers to understand that even though you may go through difficult ordeals, but we have the avenue of calling upon God and lifting our children up. Amen? We're never to give up on our children. Never, never, never. No matter what they do, no matter where they go, no matter where they come from, we never ought to give up on our children. Lift them up in prayer. That was a great word of encouragement to Hagar. Arise, lift up thy lad, and hold him in thy hand. You know, children need direction. Not only did she receive encouragement, but also she was required to be an example. Hold him by the hand. How many children are waiting right now for the parents to be an example to them? To be an example by holding them by the hand. See, they don't know how to walk. They don't know how to handle things. That's the time we think that they're supposed to know everything. But they don't. They may even say, Father, you don't know anything, but I know everything. No, they don't. They don't know anything. But we do. Because we're the fathers. We're the mothers. We are the ones that God has appointed in their life to guide them. Children are waiting for an example. Children are waiting for somebody that has been encouraged. People that are discouraged will have a tendency of discouraging everybody. But when you encourage, let me give you a little example. When you have a situation in your family and it seems to be going down the drain, it seems to be very dark and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. My God, get encouraged. Know that at the other side of the tunnel, there's a big light waiting for you. There's a rescue that comes from heaven directly to you from the Lord. Get encouraged. God is awake, He's available, He's alive and well, and He's on your behalf. I guarantee you, He wants to bless your family. Family is the cornerstone of the church. Arise up, lift up thy lad, and hold thy hand, for I will make him a great nation. And then verse 19 says, and God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. Provisions will show up out of nowhere sometimes. Sometimes we can't see those provisions because we're so blinded with the problem. We're so blinded with the circumstances. We're so blinded with things. But the Word of God says that God opened her eyes. The only one that can open your eyes is God Himself. And she saw the well. And she took water and gave water to her son. You know, when she left home, she left with a small bottle of water, or a skin of water, and a little bread. That was given to her by Abraham. But God gave her a well. God gave her a well, and not only that, He gave her the encouragement to be an example, the provision to be an example to her child. So let me encourage you moms today. Whatever you might be going through is not the end of it. God is ready to succor you. God is ready to bless you. God is ready to take you up and give you strength, because strong moms is a cornerstone of family life. And we know that moms are going through difficult times right now. But God has the answer. God has the strength. God has the grace. God has everything that you need so we can have good families. Good families make strong churches. If we don't have strong families, we won't have a strong church. We need to have strong families in the church. For this reason, I want to tell you, and like I said, it takes a lot more minutes, but we're going to be done because we need to proceed with our program. The provisions are brought on by God. When God opens our eyes, we're able to see clearly. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can say about that. We were blind in the things of the world. We were blind in the things that Satan were doing to us. But now God has opened our eyes and we can see clearly. I'm going to be done with this message.